This is the Born Sacrifice channel, and this is episode 3 of the 94S build. And this episode I'm going to be fitting the flywheel and clutch and modifying the VW Bellhousing so that it fits onto the Porsche torque tube. This is the original Bellhousing from the Porsche engine. It just quite simply, nicely bolts onto the back of the engine, torque tube bolts onto here, and then you've got the drive shaft which runs from here to the back of the car to the transaxle. So quite simply, we've got 3 locating dowels. These need to be replicated. These are what position the Bellhousing against the torque tube, and then there's the 3 bolts here which then bolt on. In addition to getting that right, so we know what the centre is going to be, in addition to getting that right, we obviously also need to get the correct distance from the back of the engine to the face of the torque tube. So that's what we're working to. There's some other differences which I'll cover off in a little bit. But before I get on and pull up the Bellhousing from the VW engine, so a full Golf GTi gearbox, and this top section here is not needed, so it's unbolted and unceremoniously thrown in the bin because it's not needed. It's pretty much everything at the bottom from this that we actually want. Just basically need to get the Bellhousing, so everything on that right hand side needs to go because it's entirely unnecessary. So you can sort of see at the back there where the starter motor mounts. To give you a point of reference, a lot of this stuff here is just sort of chopped away and then ground back to make it smooth. It's a bit wasteful, but the whole gearbox cost me about £40 from the breakers just to give me pretty much everything that is below that line. Hopefully you've got a better idea now of what I started with in terms of the gearbox and how much I cut that down. So let's put this to one side and bring up the VW Bellhousing, which is now here. This has been cut back and ground back. There's a bit here that I need to just try and cover up and just close that in to prevent any dirt getting in. Whereas the Porsche one was like that, this is going to sit that way in terms of where the starting motor goes. Going to cause a slight problem with the transmission tunnel. I know that from other people having done it, but I'll worry about that at some point soon. Next, obviously this is no sort of a surface to be working on. So the other thing that I've done is had a piece of 4mm steel, and I've basically taken that, traced it around the edge, and just made this plate which will bolt nice and neatly onto top there as a cover. And from that I've then got a nice flat surface to work with to replicate, basically take that and recreate it on there so that this will then mount up to the torque tube. Right, before I can start offering things up to the drive shaft, I first of all need to cut a hole in here, basically so that the drive shaft can fit through. There is a hole on the back, so I'll go through here and I'm just going to make the hole roughly in the centre, so the I think from the height I'm not going to get this whole thing through in one go, but we'll see. Okay, so I didn't quite realise drilling was going to be so tough. Hopefully this is in enough of the right place, the hole that I've got here, and size that actually everything's going to fit. It seems to be about the same internal diameter as this. It's just how close it is on position. So I'll have a look at that. This thing, I'm not overly impressed, but it was cheap. So after a rather special drilling experience, the hole's there and it's not quite centre, but the main thing is that everything seems to line up how it should. Just grab this and turn it over and see. So looking through there, there's nothing obscuring on the other side, and that's the main thing for me. There will be another plate on this side, so I just need to make sure that that's a bit more accurate. But yeah, relatively pleased with that, and I can now get on with offering this up to the car. Okay, I now need to loosely fit the bell housing and just see how I'm doing for space. Okay, so stumped fairly early on there. Just here, the side of the bell housing is hitting the body of the car. And also when this gets pushed back a bit, I'm going to have to take some of this off because the starter motor is going to clash as well. I just wasn't expecting to run into problems this soon. So I need to pop the bell housing off and then just shave this down so that I can move it further back. So even with a bit of shaving down, it's still hitting the transmission tunnel, so that's going to need to be shaved off a bit. And so unfortunately it means I'm going to need to pull the engine back again and get a hammer and start bashing the bodywork in slightly. I knew I was going to have to do this. I'm going to do this temporarily now, and then I'll need to make good a bit later on when everything's in place. So yeah, let's get the hammer. Okay, with a bit of cutting, bashing and grinding, everything's now offered up and in position, which is great. I did, where I was having the problems positioning the engine, I took the plate off because I thought that might be an issue, the current end cap which I had cut. So I'm just going to go down now and bolt that back on, and I'll try and get the camera underneath to have a proper look. But actually relatively pleased, having cut that section out without cutting through the seam and then just flattening that back. I've now got something that I can work with to put a new panel in there to try and make things right when everything's done. being optimistic about it. And here we can just see the where the starter motor, so that's been cut out. The metal was coming across there, and then there was a cover on top and heat shielding, so that will be done and then filled. Right, I've done some thinking overnight, trying to work out why things aren't quite fitting the way that I wanted them to and the way that I think they should be fitting, and I realised I've been a complete moron. The cars level, the jigs level, everything's been meticulously levelled out, well, sort of meticulously, and I haven't levelled out the torque tubes, so that's just sitting on the bracing, which means that it's front to back, it's actually pointing down, we'll be pushing the gearbox up. So what I need to do now is basically get that levelled out. Okay, I didn't think you really need to see me making this, but I've just built up a wooden box type frame to support the jig, hopefully at the height that it needs, and I've trimmed these down. It's screwed through into the wood so that that's not going to shift. So hopefully finally we can get the engine to the right height and then get a proper look at what needs doing. So with the wooden frame in place to lift the jig up, the engine is now in place, the drive shaft is being supported as well, and the clearance is now there. This is more what I was expecting. I think there's possibly going to be some snagging here, so I'm maybe need to trim that once the steering rack is actually in. And yeah, everything else is looking lined up. It all meets at the back. The other thing which I've done is just put this metal crossbar over to be able to see what the clearance is going to be between the engine and the bonnet. And it's tight, and I've purposely left it tight, but the high point on the engine is the filler cap, and that seems to be giving me just about enough space. I just started cleaning this up, and I thought actually I didn't know about this until a few months ago, so I suspect there's probably other people out there that don't. So yeah, distilled vinegar, just plain old vinegar. I buy this in bulk now, and yeah, just red Scotch Brite pad, and where this is tarnished. So the metal's already been soaked, but just get some vinegar on there, and yeah, it's incredible. There we go. So that's where I've done the other side before I thought I'd record this. This one looks a bit pitted, so it's not going to get rid of everything, but it should fairly quickly get it back to a nice clean surface. So I just thought it'd be worth showing for people that don't know. First of all is the guide sleeve. This just about fits over. There's no seal on the one that's come off on the Porsche one. I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be greased, but it's very tight, so I'm just going to pop a little bit of universal grease on there. Okay, now the clutch release lever needs to go on, which is that way up. So there's a few bits I need to get in there first. I need to get the spring clip. And this one calls for a bit of copperies. There we go. late one evening. It's about 10:30, not long back from work, and cereals for supper, which isn't ideal, but stop me eating, going straight to bed. I'm just finishing up on a couple of bits in here, mostly because I realised that I haven't actually got anything as to sort of wrap up this week. So obviously it's been a bit disappointing. I've spent a lot of time correcting the work that I'd already done previously, but as I said, this was very much going to be a learning experience. It's good to have gotten as far as I have in terms of getting the bell housing on and everything in position, so I'm quite pleased with that. I'm slightly concerned with the clutch setup, because when the bell housing goes on, it still feels slightly sprung against the top with the bearing, the release bearing on the top of the clutch plate. I don't know if this is normal. If I can find out, that'd be great, but otherwise I'm just going to leave it and see what happens when everything's together. So yes, I need to work out what I'm going to do about the gap between the back of the bell housing and the torque tube. I've got some ideas on that, and I want to do some test fabrication before I start moving on or spending a load of money on stuff. And what was the other thing? Oh, the other thing which I'll probably have a look at now is cutting the sump down and just making that so that it fits over the cross member. Yeah, and I'll see how quickly I get on with that. I think I've solved the problem with the welding, sort of. It's not brilliant, but I think I've got there compared to the last episode, which was a mess. Slightly odd problem, and if I get time I may just put something at the end of this video or at the start of the next. It's something to do with the welding magnets, which is a bit weird. But anyway, once again, thank you for watching, and next time I'm going to be cutting stuff up and having another go at welding. Thank you. Cheers.